very much for that lovely introduction, but can I just say thank you to Elise, Madison, Gracie and Isabella. You have certainly taken the wind out of me, and I wish I had a little bit longer to prepare a reflection, because what you've just shared with us was so incredibly powerful. Can I also start by acknowledging all of the First Nations people in the room, and acknowledging that we're on Turrbal and Yagara land, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also want to thank and acknowledge all of the amazing young people who are coming here today to share not just their own story, but their expertise and their understanding of the issues that we really all need to be very focused on. And I think when I listen to the four of you, one of the things, and I'm sure it will become clearer to me in the days ahead as I reflect on the things that you've said, but all of you had such a sophisticated understanding of what a system is. And you spoke about systems in a range of ways. So we heard about family as a system. So, I'm thinking about particularly from Isabella and Gracie, that idea of what is happening within your family having such a profound impact on you as a young person and your ability to enjoy your childhood. Obviously, from Madison's perspective, you're hearing about a young person having such a sort of traumatic experience within a system that isn't able to, it's a public system, unable to meet your needs, unable to give you the reassurance that you can still afford your groceries, but also make sure that you get the medical attention that you need. And Elise, what a sophisticated way of talking about the impacts of housing insecurity. A young person who is trying to navigate, and sounds like very successfully navigate, an education system that isn't providing for those basic needs. And I think that's what's really clear here, is what we're talking about with material basics is a really foundational right. The four young people that we heard from just now aren't talking about wanting things that are above and beyond what anyone should be able to expect. They are the foundations for a good quality life, and they are the foundations that set young people up to be able to dream of what their future looks like. And at the stage you are in your life, of course, that's what you should be doing, both enjoying being a young person, but thinking about what the future holds for you. And for all of you, I'm sure the future holds some really, really incredible things, and it speaks to the need to make sure that all young people have those material basics met. I think when I think about material basics, something that has been of great interest to me in my career has been human rights. And often human rights are about giving people freedoms. But what we know about rights and being able to experience your rights is that you have some basic needs that need to be met. And you have a right to have those basic needs met. So we're talking about resources, actually. And in the stories that we heard, or in the experiences that we were shared, we're talking about resources that should be available to everyone as a public service or a public resource. And so when you listen to the stories of these young women, you think, how do we live in a state like Queensland, which is so full of resources and prosperity, and yet we have more and more young people and families who can't access that prosperity. And so first of all, we question how on earth that can be the case. But secondly, we have to make sure that we never accept that that's the case, because it's simply not right. And we all need to work harder to make sure that all young people, that all Queenslanders have access to the prosperity and resources that our state has available. I think the thing that is really clear for me listening to those experiences is, each of you did such a phenomenal job of not just sharing your own experience, but understanding that experience as something that illustrates a broader issue. And you all pointed to different data sets or research that highlights that this is a systemic issue. I completely agree with you. At QCOS, I lead the peak body for community service organisations, and we hear from frontline services every day, as well as we conduct our own research, and we know that it is very, very difficult right now for people on low incomes to have a good quality of life. Our most recent living affordability report shows that for a single mum with children, she's running a weekly deficit of $200 a week just to get by, and that's just to meet basic expenses, let alone suddenly becoming very ill and requiring medical attention. Our modelling is modelling a single mum who is working in our sector, raising 2 kids. She's running a weekly deficit of $200 a week. So then I guess in my job I have a huge and profound privilege of each day being tasked with advocating for people on low incomes, or the interests of people on low incomes. And when I explain those statistics or that research to politicians or publicly in the media, I always get asked the question, but if they're running a weekly deficit, how is it that they're getting by? And all of you explained that. People are making impossible decisions about whether to access healthcare, about what to eat, whether to skip meals so their kids can eat, whether to reduce the nutritional value of their food because the less healthy food is cheaper, whether to get their kids to school, and of course delaying healthcare, which we obviously heard a lot about that just now. We know on the one hand that people are making those impossible decisions, and then we know on the other hand that in fact the state has the prosperity and resources that are needed. So what we need to focus on is making sure our prosperity is shared, and not just shared so that, we all know that we have a cultural expectation that health and education should be available to everyone. Health and education. I think we need to move to a cultural expectation that everyone has housing, so that we all believe everyone should have housing, and young people should have access to education, and everyone should have access to healthcare. Now, these are universal systems that should be provided publicly. What we do know with universal systems is that there are people that will struggle to access those systems because of underlying issues, including poverty, including having a low income. And so it's not just about providing good quality universal systems, it's about also providing targeted supports and interventions to make sure that where families don't have access to those universal systems, we're helping them. We're creating a system. We're building a better system, a system that enables access. And I think that's one of the, we did some research recently to look at, our services were telling us more and more that young people and children were struggling, that families were having a difficult time. And when we commissioned the University of Queensland to do some analysis of this, they found that a lot of the policy settings that we had in Queensland, that we've had in Queensland, imagine a young person or a child as independent from a system, so not living within a family or a community. So if there was going to be help available, it was only imagining the young person as opposed to imagining all of the people and the system that exists around that people. And then on top of that, it imagined that all of those young people had the same ability to access those universal systems. So on the back of that research, we have, together with community service organisations, launched a new campaign called Raising Queensland, and it is really about that. It's saying, let's do some work, let's encourage the Queensland Government to do some work to make sure, one, those universal systems are fit for purpose, and two, that people who aren't accessing those services or are struggling to access those services have the targeted support they need. So, responding to Elisa's story, this plan needs to give us urgent access on housing. It is not okay to hear us, I'm grateful, Elise, for you sharing your story, but it is not okay for us to sit there and to know that right now there are other young people that are still living intense. Young people are facing off against an incredibly hostile housing market. And what we're hearing right now from the Queensland government is if that we build, the market's going to look after everyone. And we know that is just not true. Families that are living in tents and cars right now, people on extremely low incomes, are not going to benefit from just a build approach. We need more public housing, we need more affordable housing, and we need to accept that markets don't provide, markets are not compassionate, and that when we just put more stuff in a market, it doesn't mean that people who are vulnerable and disadvantaged eventually receive a benefit. It means making sure that there is healthcare accessible where people live. And we've just heard two really compelling experiences that I think, I'm a single mum and I have 2 kids, and I was listening to those stories just thinking, wow, that bit about the family system, when mum's sick, something's happened to mum, the impact on so much of the well-being of kids is so profound. And the stories that you shared highlighted how simply we could support those young people and those families, helping mum, giving mum better healthcare to make sure that kids aren't worrying about the things that they shouldn't be worried about, distracting them from the things they should be able to focus on, learning, being involved in their community, and dreaming about the future that they are entitled to. It also means making sure that our income support system is fit for purpose, so that when people are reliant on government payments, that they don't push them into poverty, which is what our current system does. It also means investing in community services, so that those services that walk along families and young people have the resources they need to help people access the supports and the universal systems. I think today highlights, and Elise, Gracie, Isabella and Madison, you did such a fantastic job of highlighting that this is not just about policy settings. This is actually about who we listen to. And I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge that young people are not just future stakeholders. We don't just do this work to set us up for the future. Young people are alive now, experiencing lives now. Their lives are as important as anyone else's lives, and also young people are experts. We just heard some really important insights that were shared, and we need to listen to that. So I just want to end where I began, and just thank the 4 of you so much for sharing those phenomenal experiences with such strength and intelligence. You've really blown me away, and I think it's helped us to all double down on our commitment to making sure that in this beautiful and this beautiful state full of prosperity, that all young people share in those resources. Thank you.